I had so much fluid accumulation as a result of my heart failure episode that within just 8 days of being in the hospital, I lost 10 kilograms. Hi everyone, welcome to part 3 of my journey from heart failure to heart transplant. The last video was a little bit chaotic, I'm not gonna lie. Within days to weeks of coming back home from university to revise for my final year university exams, I experienced an episode of acute heart failure, and by the 20th of April I was admitted into the good old LGI, Leeds General Infirmary. This video will be all about life in the hospital. I'll share my thoughts on living with other heart patients in the cardiac ward and just how much I benefited emotionally from speaking to someone like me with heart problems. I'll talk about how I spent Eid in the hospital, receiving infusions of Furosemide, you know, that medication that basically makes you pee like there's no tomorrow. And also how they found out my heart was working at 10 to 15% ejection fraction and what the next steps were going to be to move things forward, which would include having an ICD fitted and going for a heart transplant assessment. So when we first arrived at the hospital, my parents took me up to the ward in a wheelchair, because if there's one thing that I learnt over the past couple of days, it was that somehow just walking a couple of steps would be enough to trigger this vomit reflex. I learnt that at A&E number 1, and I learnt that at A&E number 2, where I'd be getting up from the car and somehow just walking was just stressing my body out, and then I would just go bleh. And yeah, so when we entered the ward, there was this really lovely on-call doctor who basically took us all into a quiet room and took my medical history and did an examination, and then he could clearly see that I had loads of fluid on my body. So the first thing he was like, we need to get you on IV Furosemide, because the oral tablets that I was on, oral tablets of Furosemide, they weren't going to be effective enough to get rid of that fluid quickly, because my heart was struggling and the fluid, which was causing all of this overload, it was affecting my organs. So first step was to get rid of as much fluid as possible, which was going to take that burden off of the heart. And they were going to just monitor my heart function, ECG, echo, blood tests, all of that jazz, and just see how I get on over the next few days. The large number of patients that I was with, they were in their 60s, 50s or 60s, but I cannot explain to you how much I personally benefited just from speaking to somebody who had a heart problem. Yep, that's right. This was my very first encounter with other heart failure patients. Despite having a heart condition for several years, I never joined a support group, mainly because I didn't know they existed. For more information about these support groups, see the description box below. Hearing from other patients and knowing that you are not alone in your journey can provide a great deal of comfort. It was just so nice to see someone who's got like fluid on their legs, and I'm seeing them and they're also having problems with their breathing and they have to stack their pillows up, and I'm like, yes, you understand. So it wasn't just me, you know? It was these little things that really helped, and it helped me not feel alone. The very next day, after being admitted into hospital, it was Eid. So for those of you who don't know, Eid is very special for Muslims all over the world. Typically you wear some nice clothes, you meet with family, you go to the mosque and pray in congregation, you have lots of like food. It's just a nice celebration. I hadn't told any of my friends that I was admitted into hospital. Nobody knew. We kind of agreed as a family, you know, let's not talk about it because we don't want people to just bombard us with messages. It's just going to distract us from spending good quality time with each other. It's hard because I'm here getting messages from all my friends like, oh, show us your Eid pics. What are you wearing for Eid? And here I am just like in my nightgown, like, yeah. It's not a nice feeling being in the hospital on a day of celebration. I had a bit of a cry early morning when they had to like recannulate me. I also felt a lot of guilt that my parents were with me, where they could have been celebrating Eid as well, like with friends, family, and you know, they're just stuck with me. I remember just sort of saying to my mum, I was sort of like apologising for like, oh, I've ruined your Eid. She was like, Mary, don't you dare say that. Like, we are all together and that's all that matters. It wasn't the fact that I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital surrounded by patients who made sure that I was not upset, who were making me laugh, who were coming in for different procedures and I was learning all about these other procedures, who were telling me about their heart problems, who I could learn from. I was in the hospital, but I was surrounded by the best of healthcare staff who were keeping me reassured, who were keeping me on my feet, who were informing me of the changes every step of the way. I was in the hospital, but I had my family. I was in the hospital, but I had my family. And that's something that some people may not have. They might just be completely isolated. So I had to look on the bright side. As long as you're happy, and as long as you find that little silver lining that's going to make your day better, that is it. That's all you need. One of the things that was on my mind in the hospital was my exams, was my graduation. It was the only thing I was thinking about. My dissertation was due the day I was discharged from hospital. I had a dream that I submitted my dissertation late. Like, obviously, I'm thinking about it, it's on my mind, but I need to not think about it, I need to recover. I've just had an acute heart failure episode where my heart just crashed in function. I can't be thinking about exams right now. I hadn't filled in the form that you have to fill in to get an extension and all that, but obviously I'm in hospital. I really needed some advice on how to go through with that, and so me and my dad had a telephone conversation with the head of neuroscience at the time, and it was as if a huge weight was just pulled off of my shoulders because I needed the reassurance to know that my degree wasn't at risk. You know, despite my health concerns, sometimes you never know with these like uni people, like it's just scary. Because the thing is, if you don't submit something, then they're like, oh, you didn't submit it, so we can't blah, 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 blah. And then I had my doctor write a letter to the neuroscience team, and it was good communication. Because all of these things play a role in increasing your stress, and anyone who's anyone will know that stress can contribute to worsening of health. And if you already have a pre-existing heart condition, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse with more stress. So we had to eliminate as much stress as possible. One of the tests they did when I was first admitted was an NTproBNP blood test. It's not invasive and they can get so much information about your heart function just from this little blood test. It's amazing. My NTproBNP when I entered Leeds was over 7,000. Now for context, anything above 2,000 is like, we need to look further, we need to investigate things further. A month later, before my pre-assessment, it reached 9,000. So quite high, quite high. So Furosemide, as I mentioned in the previous video, like basically rids you of all of your fluid. If you've got fluid accumulation as a result of heart failure, it just goes whoosh and it makes you pee a lot. When you are releasing urine, you're not just releasing water, you're also releasing electrolytes within the water. And I found for the first time that I started to get a huge salt craving. There'd be days and I would just be like, I just want like those chive and onion twists. I just want to snack on some pretzels. Anything salty, I just wanted it. But still, on diuretics, you've got to be careful about your salt intake, because the thing is, if you have salty foods, your body is going to want to conserve that water and keep it in. But that's not good for someone with heart failure who's presenting with fluid overload, because you need to flush that fluid out. So you need to limit your salt intake. And that was really, really, really hard. Because like, not only you're not allowed salty foods, you're also not allowed water. You have to limit your water intake. So you're just like, well, what do I eat then? Cabbage. Just give me cabbage and I'll chew on cabbage. I entered Leeds 69 kilograms, 20th of April, and I left Leeds at 59 kilograms, 28th of April. Even though Furosemide is not a weight loss pill, that just goes to show you I had a lot of fluid. I had a lot of fluid on my body. I had fluid all over my body, all around my tissues, around my organs, around my liver, and this resulted in me having an acute liver injury as a result of my heart failure. Wow. And that was the reason why I was gagging a lot and I was vomiting a lot, because there was a lot of fluid around my liver. But as they got rid of all the fluid, you kind of like killing two, is that the word? Killing two birds with one rock, one stone? Killing two birds with one stone? I think it's that. My liver got better and my heart got better too. My doctor said, look, we've been putting off getting an ICD for ages. We've discussed having a subcutaneous and we've discussed having a transvenous. We need to move things forward now because you have just had an acute heart failure episode. I was fully like, yeah, just do what you need to do at this point. I think I have delayed things too much, and it's one of those things like, you don't want to get an ICD because you think you're fine. But then if you think about my situation, like, I was doing fine as well. But it just takes one dangerous rhythm and then it's lights out. And I know that sounds really grim, but when there isn't a defibrillator nearby, it is just lights out. And that's why I think, in hindsight, I would definitely have opted in for the ICD earlier rather than later. I will explain in the next video when I go and get my transvenous ICD fitted. This was going to be the plan, and I was not going to back down this time because I had this terrifying episode of acute heart failure and I did not want to risk anything at this point. Another thing that the doctor said I would need to have is a pre-assessment for a heart transplant. This ICD, as nice as it is that it was going to potentially save my life, it wasn't going to rid me of the actual problem, which is the heart disease, the dilated cardiomyopathy. And so my team in Leeds felt like I needed to go and see someone who was more specialist in advanced heart failure. The doctor kept saying like, oh, we're going to refer you to either Manchester or Newcastle because they are tertiary centres for people with advanced heart failure. And I don't remember him using the word transplant. Because I was so stressed about everything in general, like I was still stressed about my exams, the exams that I wasn't taking, and the fact that I probably wouldn't graduate this year. I was still stressed about that. So in a way, I'm very grateful if he didn't mention the word transplant in front of me. Like, I'm happy. I'd rather it just be called tertiary centre and then deal with the consequences later. I'd rather get properly debriefed about the idea of getting a transplant when I get there. Obviously, that's just my opinion, but maybe people would rather be prepared like early. But because everything was happening so suddenly anyway for me, I'm very grateful that he didn't mention the word. At least I think he didn't. Maybe it's just a protective thing, you know? It's such a big thing to deal with, the word transplant, so in a way, I'm happy. So yeah, he said that you'd have to go to this tertiary centre and you're just going to have a chat with someone who's more expert and they will advise you on what to do. We can't advise you on anything because they will do all the tests again and get a big overview of your heart function to then determine whether you are a good candidate for a heart transplant. So yeah, that was my time in Leeds. In the next video, I'll talk about the day that I got my ICD fitted. Thank you for listening, and I hope this has helped.